everyone's I'm going to mute everyone's microphones now, apart from perhaps Karine, who might want to say something. There we
go. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Good. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming to this event. This is the first major online event that we've run for the British Daoist Association. So I'm very pleased to welcome Karine Martin, Jing, who has been a part of the British Daoist Association for a long time, very much one of the earliest companions in Daoism who I met here in England, yes, a long time ago. And since that time, our paths have crossed on a number of occasions in the UK and in France at Karine's Daoist Centre, and in China as we've spent time visiting and travelling around the Daoist temples there. And I think one of the reasons why it's really so great to have Karine talk to us is particularly because of the amount of time that she spent living in China and really immersing herself in the Daoist temples and in the temple tradition and developing really close relationships with the Daoists who really live that life there. So her experience in that regard is really quite unusual, considerably more than my own. And in addition to that, Karine is following her own Daoist cultivation and sharing that with others through the French Daoist Association. So I think she has a lot to offer us, and it's always really I think it's really important to hear a diverse range of voices expressing sort of different perspectives on Daoism and different personal experiences and approaches, because it's a very individual path in many ways, and I think it's really helpful to watch other people as they find their own way and share that. So I think it's a great support for all of us to participate in this kind of sharing, and I'm looking forward to what Karine has to say. So without further ado, I will pass over to you, Karine, and you just to inform you of how we're planning to run this session. Karine's going to talk for a period of time, and there will be a time for questions and answers at some point. And what would be great is if you do have questions, you're welcome to pass them to us. And if you can function using the chat function and send questions specifically to Sarah Hill, then we'll gather those during the session, and we can pass them on to Karine to answer with what time we have available for that. So yeah, I hope you're all clear on that, and possibly we may there may be a short meditation period as well, but I'm leaving that for Karine to decide as we go along. So Karine, please, yeah, I'll pass over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to each of you to attend this online meeting. it's very nice, and I can see and recognize many familiar faces, so it's lovely. When Sarah and Peter contacted me to suggest that we organize this meeting, I was a bit worried because I haven't spoken English for a long time. So I don't know how it's gonna go, but I'll just go with whatever English I have left in me, and I'll just share it with you, and hopefully that's gonna make sense. And also it's I remember while I was in the middle of my life in China, at some point I came back to Europe for a few days, and I can't remember why, but I ended up in England, and Jing invited me to come and give a short speech during an afternoon that they were all gathering to meditate. It was a day of meditation, and I was around, and he asked me to come and talk about what I had learned in China, in the temples, with the Daoist masters. And I remember at the time, it was maybe 10 years ago, I didn't have much to say then. And what I realized is that now I still don't have much to say. I think I even have less to say than before. So I think it's one of those funny things about Daoism. The more you practice and the more you learn about it, the less you have to say about it. So it's one of those things, you know. I guess it's because when you start learning or practicing, you have a lot of expectations and aims and the will to reach a certain state of being or a certain amount of knowledge, a certain number of techniques. But the more you practice and the more you really get closer and closer to the teachings, the less you actually obtain things, and the less you have desires to obtain more things or a certain state of being. You're just satisfied with whatever is inside you, outside you, and whatever is happening on your meditation cushion or in your life. So basically things just become more and more simple. And that's, I think, what is Lao-Tzu trying to make us understand through the 81 chapters of the Daode Jing, or Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi really is a wonderful teacher, and all these lovely stories, very light and sometimes funny. All they're trying to say is, go back to being simple. Go back to simplicity. And that kind of discourse or views are so useful nowadays when you look at the life we live, the society, the things that are going through our life every day. It's more and more complicated. It's like one complication after another. And the Daoist teachings just tell us, no, go back to the simplicity of who you are, what you are, and what life is. Just go back to that simple piece of wood. There's a story in Zhuangzi that talks about that piece of wood, the uncarved block, and go back to that state. And it's easy because it hasn't left you that state. You don't have to create it. You don't have to attain it. It's inside you. You just have to reconnect yourself to it. And once you get a closer connection to that part of you that is just this uncarved block, that is pure simplicity, then things just relax. There's something that inside you or outside you relax. 放松, comme on dit, as we say in Chinese, 放松, 放松. There's something that, because you've gone back to your own original nature. The more you are distanced, away, pulled away from your original nature, it creates a tension inside you. And that tensions will spread into your life, into many areas of your life, into your body. It will create pain, disease. Into your life, it will create tensions with the people around you. Into your workplace, it will create unease. Things become uneasy. It's because of that tension, that distance between the way you live your life and your original nature. So the closer you get to that original nature, the more something inside you feel at ease. There's an ease. That's why Zhuangzi starts by the first chapter called Easy Wandering. Easy, something very easy. And then your body can breathe, the energy can flow freely, and your relationship with people are just easier because they are based on the simplicity of the way you feel around them. So really, I think it's one of the very precious thing about Daoism. It doesn't teach us how to become a Daoist. You know, that was my question when I arrived in the temples. And it lasted for months, or maybe the first 3 years. I wanted to do good, you know, I wanted to be a good student. I wanted to be a good Daoist. And so that was inside my mind, how do I become a good Daoist? I want to be a true Daoist, you know. And suddenly at some point I realized, but no. That's not about becoming a Daoist, that's about becoming yourself. It has nothing to do with becoming something else than yourself, you know. So, suddenly something just let go, you know, and that space and that easiness came inside me. It wasn't about reaching a goal of being something else than you are. It was, you don't become a Daoist, you become yourself. You return back to that state of your true self. That's it, you know. So you don't reach for something outside of you. You reach for something inside of you that never left you, that is inside. So it's really a movement inside, a movement backward. That's why we return to the Tao. That term, that expression, return to, reverse to, it's you return to the Tao, you return to your true self. So it's a movement backward, it's not a movement forward. It's not a movement towards the external things, it's a movement towards your internal self. And it can be very difficult at first because we've been conditioned by the society, the way we've been raised up, by the way our mental work, to reach outside, to reach for things outside, to always move forward. You hear it every day since you were a child. Move forward, go forward, you know. Do better. Become an engineer, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become a Daoist, become a Buddhist, become something. It's never just be yourself. It's like become, go forward, go and grab something, go towards something. But in Daoism, it's go back to, it's reversed, you know. It's that, it's just a different movement. So yes, that's very important to understand, and we have many tools to help us understand that. It's a very old tradition, and all the masters before us, all the practitioners, they've laid out different tools to help us to grasp and understand these movements of going back inside, going back towards yourself instead of moving forward. Those tools, there are the text, the ancient text, many of them, the essentials of the essence of the text, I mean the essential text, let's say, that contains the essential teachings and concept. It's obviously the Daode Jing. We call it in Chinese the text, the classic in the 5,000 words. It's not much, 5,000. It's just to show you how simple it is. It's like 5,000 words, 81 little poems. You know, it's so small. I don't have it here, but it's very small. You've got it, I hope, because you're all most of you are part of the British Daoist Association, and I know that you've been trained well. And Jing very often refer to the Daode Jing, so I'm sure you all have it on your bookshelves. So we have the text. The one at the core is the Daode Jing, and then we have other texts around it, like the Zhuangzi, which I know Jing also uses a lot into his retreats and workshops. Zhuangzi, Lizi, and other. Those are little stories to illustrate what are the main concepts of Daoism. And then we have other texts that are not so well known, that are in the Daoist canon. Some of them have been translated, some have not been translated. We've got the rituals, the text from the rituals, where there are very deep teachings inside, like in the temples, we recitate every morning and evening the Zhaowang Gongke, donc the morning liturgy and the evening liturgy, and inside there are those concepts to understand. It's to remind us on what is the path of the return to the Tao. And then there are texts that are more about meditation, like the Jing, the classic of the purity and tranquility, that I know Jing refers often. He often refers to that text. And we have some alchemical texts that are more into symbols of what's going on inside ourselves when that transformation of returning to who we are happens. The text of the alchemy. So there are also texts about ethics, conduct, how to lead your life in an ethical way, because it's also part of the practice. And then that's the text. We also have the techniques, pure techniques, that deal with how to use the body, how to maintain the body in good health. For example, Jing uses a lot the Daoyin, that very soft way of stretching and making the body more supple to help the energy to circulate. So that's another tool that the Daoists have left us. And also the meditations. There are different kinds of meditation. A few days ago, one of my students, a new student, asked me, what is Daoist meditation? And I said, there are many techniques. If you want to go into techniques, then there are many techniques. There's not one Daoist meditation. There are different approaches to meditation within the Daoist system. And there are some techniques linked to breathing techniques, focalization techniques, visualization techniques. So there are all those techniques. But those techniques are totally useless if you leave out those main concepts and Daoist views on things. It's like the cushion on which you meditate. You can't do without it. It's like you need to have that understanding of the Daoist views so that it helps your practice. One of those important concepts is Wuwei. That's why when Sarah and Peter contacted me to ask me, okay, let's choose a theme of today's online meeting, I thought, well, let's go for Wuwei. Because it's really central, you know. It's once you've understood Wuwei, basically you've got it, right? It's why? Because it's the characteristic of Dao. Wuwei is the characteristic of Dao.
On your bookshelf.
And I am gonna read, as I said just a few minutes before we started the meeting, I realized that all my books here at the temple are in French. So I was like, oh no, how am I gonna quote from the Daode Jing in French? But luckily I just found this book from Livia Kohn about the Daode Jing. And I just happened to, 1 minute before we start the meeting, to open the page where I realized it was the quotes for the Daode Jing on Wuwei. So I'm just gonna read them. So it's a translation from Livia Kohn. It's one of her new texts, one of her new book from Oxford University Press for people who might be interested. And it was published, it was published last year in 2019. And it's good because she divides her book in the main theme, how to approach the Daode Jing according to different themes. And there's the non-action. Wuwei, it's very difficult. It's none of the translations really reflect fully what is Wuwei. We can only, through intuition and practice and reading many stories of Zhuangzi, kind of perceive the subtlety of what Wuwei means. So it's translated, here she translated as non-action, sometimes it's translated as non-interference, or many other ways. But basically, she said that non-action or Wuwei is a key quality of the Tao itself. And on the chapter 37 of the Daode Jing, there's this sentence that says, Tao rests constantly in non-action, and there is nothing that is not done. So it's really to put forward the power of Wuwei, how non-action can actually make things that nothing is not done. That's very powerful. We are used to think that we need to do things, we need to put effort into things to make them happen. But here it says something totally different. It's through not effort. It's not through efforts that things happen. It's spontaneously. It's through naturalness. It's through something that is totally effortless that it happens. So we are already totally in another dimension. We're totally in another way of doing things or understanding things compared to our usual way of living, which is put effort into things, gain things through efforts. Here it says it's effortless. That's one of the characteristics of the Tao and of Wuwei. Effortless. No efforts. And then it says about the Tao in chapter 51. Talking about things or talking about the 10,000 things, so all things around us, it says, it gives birth to them, but does not own them. It acts on them, but does not make them dependent. It grows them, but it does not master them. So what we see here is that one of the most important concepts about or a way of understanding Wu Wei is, it says that first chapter, the first line of chapter, the first line that I've just read, it says, it gives birth to them but does not own them. Not owning. Not grasping. Not making it your own. Not rejoicing in what you've done. That's an action in Wu Wei, which is an action where you don't it happens by itself. You realize that you're just one of the 1,000 elements that made it happen. It's not your doing. You think it's your doing, but it's not. Many other elements took part into it. So you are detached from the results. You're not the one who made the action. That's detachment. So it's really one word to understand. It's effortless, as I just said. The second one is detachment. You are detached from the action that you're performing. You are detached from the results. So that you do without owning the results of it. Detachment. And then we've got chapter 63. It says, act without action, deal without affairs, taste without flavors, take big things and make them small. Many easy things inevitably grow to be difficult. Thus, the sage sees difficulty even in what seems easy, and to the end is without difficulties. It's a part that would take many online meetings to understand, but here we are just gonna focus on act without action, deal without affairs, and taste without flavors. So what it's trying to say again here, it's detachment. You are detached from the result. I got an understanding of that. I remember exactly that the moment when I suddenly kind of got a little taste of what it was like to act without action, and that kind of detachment from the results. I was living in a Daoist temple led by Fang Xinzhao. So the members of the British Daoist Association know who I'm talking about because it's their master, and it's Jing masters. Fang Xinzhao, Master Fang Xinzhao, is about 70 years old. And actually on that day Graham was there also. So, and I was just by the door, and I could see inside the temple, and Master Fang was sitting there, and he was talking with some of the officials of the village, because he was trying to obtain an authorization concerning something for the temple anyway. So he was talking to them about that, trying to get the authorization to do something. I knew what he was talking about because he told me why the officials were here, and I could hardly hear what they were talking, but I could see, and suddenly I saw the ease with which he was talking. It's what I perceived. There was such an ease. It was like he was talking about something not important. I knew it was important for the temple, but there was an ease the way he talked to those officials. There was something about the feeling I got was he was like saying, okay, I'm doing what I should be doing, but no matter what, no matter the results, it's not gonna affect my inner being. And I remember I was like, wow. Honestly, I felt that. I was like, wow, that must be Wuwei. You know, and I thought, wow, imagine living your life constantly like that. It's like, there's no tension. There's no tensions toward getting something. You know, there's that tension. We are tensed forward to grasp something. You know, there's like, you feel in your body, you're tensed towards attaining something. And there was none of that in him. And I could feel that space, you know, inside of him, and that easiness, and that freedom from whatever the result would be. It would not affect him. So the way he would communicate with him, there was no with them, with those officials, there was no tension at all. And that was my understanding of a part of Wuwei. I'm not saying that it's Wuwei, I'm just like sharing with you one of my experience and what I felt. I don't know if it's gonna be of any use to you, that's not the point. I'm just like sharing, just like that little moment that I experienced in that temple and what I felt could be an aspect of Wuwei. Really easiness, you know, and no tensions towards what would be the results of the action. So that was very interesting for me. It really changed my way of doing things. So act without action, deal without affairs. So that was chapter 63. Then we have in chapter 48. He who acts for learning increases daily. He who acts for Tao diminishes daily, diminishing and again diminishing. He attains non-action. Acting in non-action, there is nothing that is not done. Chapter 48 and page 68 of that book. That's where we go a little bit deeper into Wuwei. In one of my workshops, one of my students asked about Wuwei, and he was trying to understand what's the difference between an action that is Wuwei and an action that is not Wuwei. How do you feel, know, perceive the difference between an action that you would do in that Wuwei state or not? Which type of action, he asked. And I said, that's not about how you perform the action, it's about who performs the action. Because what do I mean by Wu? It's always, it's still Karine performing the action, or Feng Xinzhao performing the action. So why do I say Wu? What's important, it's not how the action is performed or what action is Wu is performing the action. That's what is central into understanding Wu Wei. It's because, to go back to the Daoist teachings and what I was trying to say at the beginning, it's like there's this natural, spontaneous, original part of ourselves, and there's this conditioned part of ourselves. And an action that is Wu Wei is performed, emanates, takes origin into that original part of yourself and not the conditioned one. So that's why I say, when you want to look at your life and try to understand, okay, is this action Wu Wei or not? You have to ask yourself, okay, which part of myself is doing that action, is wanting that action, is expressing that action. You see? So it's not so much into how you perform the action, but which part of yourself is doing the action. Because obviously, if it's the original part of yourself, that spontaneous, that part of yourself that is really a part of the Tao, then it's obviously into a Wu-Wei state, because there's no desires attached to it. There's a very easiness about it. There's something very spontaneous. It's your original nature expressing itself through you and through the action. Instead of when it's the conditioned part, it's the part that is acting by fear. Fear of lacking of money, fear of losing someone you love and you want to spend the rest of your life with. The fear of failing, the fear of, or the need to succeed. You know, it's a different part. You see? So when those parts, acting out of fear, need to succeed, wanting to grasp, that's the conditioned part. So the action cannot be Wu Wei, no matter how well you try to follow line by line the teachings of Lao-Tzu, how he tells you what is a Wu Wei action. It's not gonna be Wu Wei. It's a conditioned action. It's not a spontaneous, natural action. And then, but if that action emanates from your natural, your inner nature, then it's gonna be just spontaneously into a Wu Wei action, a non-action. So that's why. So actually, that's why in that chapter 48, the part that I just read, acting in non-action, because you don't act. You know, the part that acts, it's that conditioned part. But when it's the spontaneous, natural part of yourself, there's no action. There's something that emanates, and that's enough for things to happen. So that's why it's also saying in the Daode Jing, in one of the things I just read, it says, it does nothing, but nothing is left undone. Yeah. So that's what the teaching about Wuwei is. So it's not so much about the action or how it performs. It is performed. It's about Wu, which part of yourself is actually doing the action. Alors then you're gonna tell me, yeah, okay, but how do I know which part of myself is actually doing the action? Well, then you have to follow the teachings of the British Daoist Association, go to the workshops, meditate, and you will perceive all those different parts inside of you, and you will perceive what is the most natural and spontaneous part of yourself. There's no shortcut. It's through inner observation, it's through meditation, it's through sitting calmly onto your cushion and going inward and looking, observing, nourishing that inner part of yourself. Going back to it. You go back to it in stillness. You go back to it through stillness. Because that part of yourself is still. So you need to be still to see it. So you need to go and sit and meditate. I think it's a bit, maybe, I don't know, it's now, there's 15 minutes left, yes, now?
Yeah.
Do you want to take some questions?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I think Sarah has the questions. Perhaps she can ask them for us.
There's one which you sort of answered just at the end there by saying that there's no shortcuts. It's about sitting in meditation. But the question was, is there any particular practice, I take that to be sort of any particular practice in meditation that most influenced you in your own cultivation?
Ah, very good question. Actually, I kept going back to the teaching that Jing gave us. It's like I feel so lucky and grateful for being given the really basis as foundation. Yeah, a strong foundation in meditation through Jing. His teachings never left me. It's something you always go back to. And I wouldn't dare summarize what are Jing's teachings on meditation, because he's the best one to talk about it, or you and or Sarah or Pete, who've been following his teachings for many years. But it's Jing. It's based on the Jing, the classic of, I don't know how you translate it in English, the exact term you use when you talk about it, but it's the classic of purity and tranquility. Yes, purity and tranquility. And it's based on a very sacred text that we recite every morning, that is the Jing, the classic of tranquility and purity. And I know that Jing refers to it. So there's that. So that practice based on that text, which is really developing clarity and tranquility inside your heart and your mind, so that you see things clearly and you stay calm. And also the reference to Zhuo Wang, the sitting and forgetting. It's been translated, I know that Jing referred to it, I would say, and also it's been translated by Livia Kohn, again, Livia Kohn here, and it's called the Zhuo Wang Lun, Z-U-O-W-A-N-G-L-U-N, and she translated that text, and it gives you some indication on how to perform meditation so that you see and perceive your inner nature and develop that spontaneity and Wuwei. So those are two very important practice. Zhuo Wang, Qin Jing, and also Zhuo Wang, that expression sitting and forgetting. It's also part of one of the story of Zhuangzi. There's a chapter concerning it in Zhuangzi.
That's great, thank you. A couple of others about or arising from the idea of Wuwei being non-action. How about if a musician wants to become better at playing his instrument, but has to apply the concept of non-action, but needs to do a lot of practice? How does Wuwei fit into that idea? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. You know, I would refer that person. I would suggest that you read the chapter in Zhuangzi about the butcher. There's a very, I don't have it here, but it contains the exact answer to his question. So there's you know which one I'm referring to, Sarah and Pete, yeah? There's a chapter in Zhuangzi that speak about a butcher. And that butcher is I'm gonna paraphrase the chapter here, but it's invited by the emperor to cut the ox, or the beef, the how do you say, the ox, and he cuts it like everybody is in awe, because it's like he cuts it without not even damaging his knife, and really taking the flesh out of the bone, like so perfectly, so fast, so harmoniously, like in one move, you know, very fluid. And then and so the emperor and everybody asked him, but how can you perform so well? And he said he's been practicing until it became natural to him, something totally spontaneous, so that when he performs, he doesn't need to think about the technique, he doesn't need to think about anything else than letting spontaneity express itself through it. So you have to practice until it becomes something natural and spontaneous. That's the teaching of Zhuangzi in the chapter on the butcher.
Thank you. Have we got time for another one? Someone else has brought up the issue of the idea of Wuwei as non-action, the concern that if we do nothing, what we can end up with is a lot of the negative things that we see around us in the world, exploitation and exploitation of the earth and of people and so forth, those things that most of us would probably see as bad things. How do we balance our idea of non-action with that?
Yes, it's a question that comes often when we talk about Wuwei. So thank you very much for asking that question. Wuwei, it's not about not doing anything. but it's from what part of yourself do you do it? You see, if you try to act on the world out of anger, then the result will not be as good as when it's just an action that is spontaneous out of compassion or generosity or trying to make the world better. You see, when you go and march in the street to defend an opinion or ecology or against oppression of women or whatever, when you defend an idea, is if you're full of anger, you will encounter problems. Like it's very, very likely. Anger attracts anger. So you go back there because you go in the street because you're very angry about the system and blah, blah, blah. And then there's this anger inside you. At some point you're gonna lose it, you're gonna hit someone, you're gonna... But if you do it out of compassion because you want to make the world better, the energy field is totally different. You walk in the street with a total different energy, you see? It's like, where does your action come from? Who is trying to change the world? Is it the angry guy who is always trying to look for a reason to go and fight? Or is it out of compassion trying to make the world a better place, you see? That's why. So act, but look at which energy you bring into your action. Is it anger or is it something lighter?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another one. Is it easier to understand Wuwei than to act from Wuwei? And how do we gain the trust in the Tao to act through non-action through Wuwei?
You can only understand Wuwei through acting Wuwei. It's like you can't just understand Wuwei and not act Wuwei. It's linked, it's connected. The understanding goes through the experience of it. It's two faces of one coin. So understanding and acting it just goes hand to hand. It's, if you want, one simple way to put it, it's like intuition also. There's something inside you that kind of knows, you know. It goes back to that part of yourself, intuition. So usually actions that are moved by intuition, something you can't really understand or express from a logical point of view. There's also that aspect, you know, to Wuwei. There's also that aspect. So trust into the Tao is another vast subject. But what I like to say, it's trust is gained and developed by observing, really observing. I mean, I'm sorry, but no matter... what's the name of the person who asked that question? Mark. Nobody asks you to trust the Tao, but observe your life. I don't know how old you are, but from that day you were born until now, there's something independent of your will that kept your heart beating, your lungs filling up with air, your blood circulating through your body. What is it? We don't ask you to trust into nothing else than that, you know. It's like there's something that kept you alive so far, and you look around you, some people didn't work like that. So there's something, you know. It's like, look at it and really feel it. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I did just one last one, which someone asks, what was the first encounter that drew you towards Daoism?
Oh, I remember that. Actually, it was. I was working in the Neuroscience Research Center in Harlow, in Essex, for Merck Sharp and Loam. And I just arrived. I started in July 97 there. And end of 97 or beginning of 98, I can't remember when, one of my colleagues, who was called, she was a Sarah also, yes, Sarah, mentioned to me that she was attending a meditation class. And she said, oh, it's great, why don't you try it? And me, at that time, I had a very difficult time making friends in my job. So I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to make friends with that colleague of mine. So I said, okay, I'll go. Although I wasn't interested in meditation at all, I wasn't. And I didn't even know what it was anyway. For me, it was a weird thing, but I just wanted to make friends. So I followed her, and it happened to be a meditation class organized by the British Daoist Association, and led and taught by Jing. And I remember that moment when I stepped into the classroom and wondering what I was stepping into. Obviously, I didn't know where that would lead me, but yeah, that's what happened. I didn't even know Daoism. I never heard of that word, and I don't think Jing mentioned it in that classroom. He was just talking about meditation. Yeah. Pete was there. Yeah, Pete, you were there. Huh?
No, I wasn't there.
You wasn't there. You weren't on that first. No, 98.
No, I wasn't. I didn't go to that class. No.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we met a little bit later.
Okay.
But it's funny that was your first encounter, because that Sarah is a very, very old friend of mine, and she also introduced me to meditation and the Daoist Association and Jing, because again, I was already her friend, but she invited me to come along to a session, and I just went because she was my friend.
Oh yes, see, she's a good one, huh? This Sarah. She was a good link. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting that you don't have to have a sort of calling for it, do you?
No.
You know, if you just happen along when it pops into your life, you know, that's good enough.
Oh, and at the time, I definitely didn't have the calling. At the time, I went to that class very scared, because for me, people who meditated were part of a cult. I was very, in my mind, I wasn't interested at all. I just wanted to make friends with her. I was like, okay, it's a contact and my job, let's just be nice, that's all. It was purely pragmatic, and actually I sat by the door thinking that's gonna be a cult and I'd better stay near the door so that I can escape. I wasn't open at all. So no, you don't have to feel the calling.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a good place to end. Is that right?
Yeah. Good.
Shadao, do you want to?
Hey, yes. Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much, Karine. That was very nice to hear your expression of that, and very nice to reflect on where we've come from since that time. It's very nice to engage in this way a little bit, and as you say, return back to those